This week on Supercars Torque, I recap the Truck Assist Winton SuperSprint. While the rest of the world was concentrating on the Indy 500 and Monaco, down under we were looking at Winton and the thunderstorms that never really came. So we'll get on a bit more of that later. To start the weekend off, Nick Percat had a new paint job. This time it was Honda. The Honda logos could have been a bit bigger on the car. It did look pretty good, but yeah, the Honda, it's awkward the way the sides of these cars swoop up these days. Some teams do it very good, others could do better. This was a definite could do better situation. And I did notice that they had Penrite on the bottom, on the bonnet of the car. Not too sure there. They normally have a tie-up with Mobil. Bit interesting that they got Penrite on the car. I wonder if there's more to this. There wasn't much else in the way of paint jobs on the weekend. The Kelly cars had a couple of windscreen banner sponsors. And of course Todd Hazelwood, the SP Tools colours had gone away, and he had, I think it was Ven IT on the side of the car, but basically his base paint job with a kind of, rolling sponsorship round to round. We had the co-driver practice session first thing on Saturday, and surprise surprise, it was the 888 boys, Lowndes and Tander out in front. No one did a bad job. It was trying conditions. It was quite a wet session, so quite a few of the guys I think were just going out to kind of get miles in the car. But funnily enough, probably the two guys that probably should be in, or the top two guys that should be in the main game, were the fastest out there up until this year. They've been the best cars in the field. Obviously the DJR cars are a bit better this year, but yeah, it's a bit of an ominous sign for the Enduros for the rest of the field. Then during practice we saw Richie have a little off. Now, it was a reasonable off, but the Gary Rogers team were up at Winton last week on a test day, and Richie had a bit of pain in his neck. Apparently he had a big accident a few years ago when he was in open wheelers and did a lot of damage, and it seems that this has kind of flared up. He only ended up doing half the test day, and he was struggling while he was going around Winton, and the seats have got big wings around so your head can't move kind of side to side in an accident, and supposedly Richie's neck was playing up and he was actually resting his head on the side of the seat. And kind of forgot where he was or something, lost it, had a fairly reasonable accident, continued for the rest of the day, but then he did end up sitting out Sunday and Chris Pither took his seat. I do wonder if he was having that much trouble on Saturday morning, maybe he should have pulled the pin as early as possible in that practice session, got Pither in the car for the rest of the weekend before he had a big accident. So the accident definitely wouldn't have helped the situation. He's supposed to be going to see go to the doctors, get some scans done during this week. He did see physio and that in between the practice crash and qualifying the race. Obviously not enough to get him going for the rest of the weekend. So race 13. A lot happened in this race. I've got a fair lot of notes here. Of course, we had Chaz on pole with Fabian second. No Scotty on the front row. That's a bit of a turn up for this year. It all changed on the first lap though. So I won't get into it too much because I could be going all day here. So the big incident that we'll get into is the DJR Team Penske cars hitting each other. It was a very light tap, which was quite interesting how far out Scott went, considering the tap probably wasn't that hard. He was going around the outside and it was a bit of a tap, so that was quite reasonable. What interested me probably was that Fabian ended up off the track as well, which to me that was quite strange. Like, if your teammate's going around the outside of you, you probably back off. You have a bit more margin for error than, say it was Chaz or someone going around the outside of Fabian. You run that a lot harder. If it's your teammate, you give him a bit more room. Like, the first rule is don't crash into your teammate. And, well, once again, Fabian's got himself into an incident. Surprise, surprise. He's punted off his teammate and he's gone barrelling off himself. Now, okay, Fabian came on as quick as possible. Yep, he was in the wrong. What Scott did, and what I was quite annoyed, the Scaife all the way through the telecast, this is wrong, rah, rah, if it had been a Triple Eight car, I think he would have been singing a different tune, but, that's beside the point. The thing is here, Scott didn't do anything wrong. He got punted off. Now, okay, if it was a street circuit, he would have hit the wall or whatever, but is it fair that he gets penalised because someone punts him off? So I think he did the right thing. He was pretty much going to be in second position. He came back on the track, he waited, he actually rejoined in third position. So there wasn't he hadn't done anything wrong and he didn't kind of lose anything. Now, what I a bit with the penalty, so Fabian had punted off his teammate. Now, Scott didn't really lose anything out of it. He didn't get a penalty. The car didn't break anything. Kind of lost one position, but he didn't really lose out from it. Now, Fabian ended up pretty much last. I think it was last at the time. Now, that's a fair penalty for bumping someone who doesn't, they didn't lose anything from it. Now, Fabian ended up with a 15-second penalty from it. Now, as I go through, I've got a few, like Lee Holdsworth spun around Anton De Pasquale. Now, that was pretty clear-cut. Bang, Holdsworth in the side of someone, tips him around. Now, 15-second penalty, fair enough for that, because Holdsworth didn't lose anything from it. And De Pasquale ended up, he lost however many positions. It wasn't that many because it was towards the end, or it was around the middle of the race. But De Pasquale was still, he lost something from that. Whereas we look at the GJR Team Penske incident, Scott didn't actually lose anything out of the altercation. So I think everyone's saying, Scott should have got a penalty for cutting the track. No, Scott didn't do anything wrong. So why should he get a penalty? All's fair kind of thing. Fabian had already been penalised by going to the back of the field. So I think this penalty for Fabian was wrong because Scott didn't lose out and Fabian did. I could kind of go on all day. If anyone's got a different view to mine, I'm happy to argue with them. I'm sure I could go all day with Scaife over this one because he seemed quite wound up and it was actually quite funny. I watched the interviews after the race and Scaife was on his high horse all about it. Scott walks in to do the post-race interview and all of a sudden we're all mates and we don't bring up the fact that, you should have got a penalty for it. But, that's Scaife for you. So there's a few other incidents during the race, but, they were all pretty kind of clear cut other than probably, the Dave Reynolds, James Courtney one. Bit of give and take there, fellas. Courtney kind of half shut the door a bit. Dave was already up there, bit of no one lost out too much. Richie and Simona. Richie once again getting into incidents he probably doesn't need to. We could go on all day about these incidents, but I don't want to bore you too much. So in the end, Scott did win the race. We had Chaz second, Reynolds third, and James Courtney ended up fourth. So a great turnaround for Walkinshaw and Andretti. Having said that, they kind of, the normal play resumed on Sunday for them. So on Sunday we had race 14, as previously discussed. Pither replaced Stanaway after he decided his neck was too bad. We had a Penske front row again, normal transmission resumes, like Walkinshaw Andretti going backwards again. Penske on the front row. So we had an interesting Chaz all day. He just didn't kind of seem to be there until that late safety car bit, which I'll get into afterwards. But he ran off by himself twice. Like, you just don't know. Another lot of 15-second penalties were handed out. So the first one, Mark Winsbottom leaving the pits and turned Simona around. Then we had Anton passing Rick Kelly. Now we had Frosty spins around Simona. Simona loses a heap of places and all that. 15-second penalty, fair enough. Anton goes to pass Rick Kelly, passes him, and that's kind of it. And he gets a 15-second penalty as well. Like, the same for both of that. And then Chaz hits Courtney up the back and sends him off. 15 seconds for that. It was like, you can have 15, you can have 15, you can have 15. We like to have consistency with these penalties. And, okay, everyone was getting a 15-second penalty, so there's consistency in that. There's a bit of a difference in, what was, does the punishment fit the crime in some of these? And, I think there's still some work to do. Funnily enough, one of the notes I've written down here in the Chaz Courtney is Courtney closing the gap. And this is kind of what I was on about with the Dave Reynolds incident from the day before, where, there's a gap there, someone starts going for the gap, and then Courtney kind of half shuts the door, and then bang kind of thing. And then, have a cry about it. Some of these guys are asking for these incidents to happen. Towards the end of the race, we had the Phantom, we had the entertainment car come out after, I was going to call him Alex Davis, after Will Davison's car broke down. It wasn't in a super dangerous position. I think we probably could have left it. But, this is the world we live in. So we had the safety car. There's quite a few guys. We had Anton, Chaz, Jacobson and Nick Percat come into the pits for new tyres. Now, the other guys were down the back not doing anything. Percat was in 5th position, so that was a ballsy move from them. So Anton and Gary Jacobson did nothing for the rest of the race. Chaz came from nowhere to 10th, and Nick Percat went from 5th to 9th in that move. So it's not one of BGR's best calls for the year. I'll give him an A for giving it a go. There was, I can't remember which race it was earlier on in the year where there was a late safety car, and I said some of the guys should have rolled the dice and pulled in. Maybe this wasn't the time to do it. But, these things happen. So at the end of the day, we had Scott winning again. Just his 10th win for the year. We've had about 11 races. It's not quite that bad, but Fab second and Wink up third. So Triple Eight definitely looking like they're back in the game. So the point score, which is looking a little bit one-sided nowadays, we've got Scott McLaughlin on 1646, Fabian 244 points behind. That's a bit of a gap. This is the worrying one. Van Gisbergen 415 points behind. That's getting towards 3 normal races away. Reynolds 426 behind, and Jamie is 476 behind in 5th. Now Jamie is over 3 normal races behind. So we're at the point Scott could not turn up to Bathurst, and Fabian's the only one that could take the championship lead at this point. He could sit out, he could, can't be bothered going to Darwin, let's, go on a hot vacation, and essentially, the worst he's going to end up is second this early in the season. Yeah, it's in the bag. The only other thing I want to discuss from this weekend was a bit of a pit snafu from Walkinshaw Andretti United. So Courtney had a long stop. I think it was a stuck wheel nut or something like that. They were dicking around with it. Anyway, with the pit stops, you get 2 pit stops and you have to put in 120 litres worth of fuel within these pit stops. This is in the longer Sunday races. Now, the fuel tanks are only 80 litres, so you have to do this over 2 stops, and you see, some guys might put in 40 litres on the first one and then 80 litres in the second, or, vice versa, and that use a bit of strategy. So, anyway, Courtney, they were putting in, let's say 40 litres in the first stop, and they had the wheel nut stick. Whatever happened, they had trouble with one of the wheels. So you've got the refueler guy standing there, he's put in his 40 litres and he pulls it out, and while they're messing around with the wheel. Now, what I don't get is, why don't they plug the fuel in and have the fuel going until all the wheels are done? So essentially, while the guy's messing around with the wheel, you're still pumping fuel in, which it means then your next stop, so you get 80 litres in this stop, your next stop you only have to put 40 litres in. So, and generally the wheels are done before the fuel's done. So then you're not losing time because of the wheel issue. Now, okay, there could be that the tank was already full or whatever, but it's not. Winton, the tank's not going to be full. So they actually did it with Pi. They had a similar problem. I think it was a wheel gun problem. So they kept filling him until they got the wheel going. Smart. They actually learnt from their mistakes. But I would have thought that something like this would have just been policy in a race like this, especially on the first stop where you know that you've got to put in 120 litres at some point. If something else is going on, just keep the fuel pumping until it's finished. Once again, we could go on for hours over these little things. I'd just like to highlight these kind of points. That's all I'm going to cover today because I've been ranting for a little bit. So until next time, see you later.
Put away your inhibitions, let the beast in you just get loose. We all young, wild, and